All right, the last thing that you need to know in order to create your amortization schedules is the lease classification. Believe it or not, the lease commencement date journal entry will be the exact same regardless of if a lease is a finance or an operating lease. Where classification comes into play is the subsequent expense recognition profile. As you can see on the chart to the right, the operating lease, that dark green line, is straight line across the life of that lease, versus the lighter green line, the finance lease, is a more front-loaded expense recognition pattern. In a few slides, I'll get to how that happens. On the left, we have the lease classification criteria. If you answer yes to any one of these, then a lease is a finance lease. If there's a transfer of ownership, if there's a purchase option a lessee is reasonably certain to exercise. Again, when you hear reasonably certain, I want you to think through those factors that we discussed on lease term. 3 is lease term is a major part of the remaining economic life of the underlying asset. 840 had a bright line here of 75%. Companies can still feel free to use that as their guide as long as they do so consistently. For the present value of lease payments exceeds substantially the fair value of the asset. Again, 840 had a bright line here of 90%. Companies can feel free to use that as long as they do so consistently. And 5 is new to 842. It actually makes a whole lot of sense. It's the underlying asset is specialized in nature. The thought here being, if the asset is specialized in nature, it can't benefit anyone else besides that company because it was built for that company. Therefore, you're inherently reaping all of the benefits from that asset. This should look oddly familiar to what we just discussed. How we've orchestrated this classification test is everything that is in this beautiful teal color is a manual data input cell. As you can see right now, this lease, everything is responded to as no, making it an operating lease. But if I change one of these to yes, it's automatically going to say this is a finance lease. One thing I do want to mention before you guys start to utilize this in your daily life, if you choose so, the third criteria around lease term, if the commencement date falls near or at the end of the economic life of an asset, for guardrails, FASB said 25% is a great benchmark. Again, you can use whatever benchmark you see, but they see 25% as a great mark. You really should not be using that criteria in order to determine if it is a finance lease. So how this example is set up right now is that remaining economic life is 24 years, but the total economic life is 100 years, meaning that this is in the last 25% of that life. Even though the lease term is 100% of the remaining economic life of that asset, it's still going to kick out to say no. If I change this to say 26, it says, yep, now you're going to be a finance lease. Let's get some use out of this lease classification. So what would the classification be assuming the following facts? I'll give everyone around a minute or two to go through this. And for those of you who said finance, you are correct. Where it tipped the scale is for the lease term, assuming your company is using the 75% threshold. It did cover that. So 5 divided by 6 is 83%, which is greater than 75%, kicking off a finance lease for that.